Hello world, it's Dave again, and welcome once again to Why is Reading Important? Dave recommends Margaret Atwood. I've thought about it, and I'm going to see about copyright or whatever, but I was thinking the music from Masterpiece Theater, whenever I started one of these things, I kept hearing that, and I'll see if I can edit it into the clips. I think it'll be pretty funny. But anyways, let's get started. Talking about Margaret Atwood, why is she so fantastic? Aside from the fact that she's Canadian. Margaret Atwood was born November 18th, 1939, and is currently 73 years old, I think. Um, she has written prolifically her whole life in a variety of different fields. To highlight this, you can look to her works of poetry. I like to write poetry as well, and she's wrote a lot of it herself. And she has 15 books of poetry. So, you can only, prolific is almost an understatement. This woman is ridiculous. 15 books of poetry, tons and tons of fictional works that she's done alongside that. She's taught at a whole bunch of different places, a bunch of different universities. I mean, to give you some kind of idea of the sort of character of this person, she was doing a graduate work at Harvard University and then just didn't finish your dissertation. Who needs that? A dissertation from Harvard, that wouldn't make you look good. She didn't need it. Who cares? Um, she taught actually at my university. Yay, that's crazy. I had no idea. She taught at a University of British Columbia in 1965. I believe just for the year. I may be wrong. Someone could correct me on that. Um, but just a vast career, doesn't necessarily associate herself with feminism, even though a lot of people have insisted that her work or earlier work dealt with that. She says that she wasn't directly a part of the movement, and so she considers herself kind of her own entity. So that's just a little bit of background about the actual person. She's wrote tons. She's writing for a while. She's got multiple awards. She's written in a number of different fields, but I want to talk about the writing specifically. What is it that I enjoy so much about the writing that I think people should read her for? And so I'm going to start with the amount of research that goes into a Margaret Atwood book. Now, I know a lot of people do a lot of good research on their books. Regardless of their field. A fantasy author will often do crazy research if they're going to talk about medieval warfare or something like that. Even if there's dragons flying around, they want the other aspects to be accurate. But I have never learned so much as to read a Margaret Atwood book, and I can give you a couple of examples. There's one book that she's written where you're dealing with these cultists, these kind of like greeny cultists. I finished recently. It's wonderful, and you learn so many different things about the natural world in this book. So a couple examples are honey. Did you know that honey lasts forever? Uh, that's incredible. I had no idea. They have actually, I looked up some other stuff. They've gone into old Egyptian tombs and they've found honey still good, still delicious. So when they say best before on a honey thing that you buy from the store, they really just mean best before. They're not saying that you couldn't still eat it. So don't be fooled by that. Don't ever throw your honey out. It's a good thing. Also, another detail regarding this, she talks about maggots in one of the books, and that's a topic I hate. I hate maggots. I've always been so disgusted by maggots. I mean, wherever dead things are, that's where maggots are, and I don't like that. But what I learned from reading her book was that maggots used to be an old method used to treat wounded flesh or gangrenous flesh or any part of your body where you had a bad wound. If you applied maggots, but were careful that the maggots only consumed whatever rotted or bad flesh was there, they're an incredibly efficient way to sanitize a wound. Who had any idea? So I just like that because this will expand into a greater idea that she's getting you to challenge your perspective about your assumptions. Just don't assume that the maggots are bad. like, and then think of that for other perspectives in your world where you may have assumed that things are one way, but the amount of incredible research that she does for her books can get you to really change your perspective on how you may have considered things, which I really, really like. Um, I also like the complexity with which she can write a story without confusing you. There's a, how did she describe it? So I just read these two books and they had this really interesting way of working, and it's called simultaneal. And that's not because I'm smart that I might know that word. I had to look that word up because she describes it in an interview where simplest way to put this is that she wrote one story where the storyline progresses, and then she wrote another story that is a continuation. It's a series actually, but then the second book, being simultaneal, was occurring at the same time or relatively similar to that same timeline, where you're going to have the characters kind of meet up. And in the second book, you're thinking to yourself, is this even the same story? This is dealing with such a separate group of people and everything, but then they, just a little bit into it, you see how they intertwine with each other. And it's brilliant, and it gives you a whole universe, because you're not just dealing with whatever area this people is in, you're dealing with this other area, and then you see how they intertwine together. So a beautiful kind of complexity that she arrives at with this method, and something I hadn't really thought of before. I haven't read a lot of books where they will do that, especially in a series. Usually it's following the same character, or progressing in a timeline where you're not then going back to another point in history when you start the next book. You expect it to continue on from the point in history that you left off at, which is incredible. And so to continue with this idea of her expanding just your general awareness, and this also ties into the amount of research. When she writes her books, you can tell that the research that she's done is not only for something like biology or call it nature studies. I don't know, there's a better word for that. Oh well. But study of our environment, you can tell that she's done that, but this woman has done incredible research of religious texts as well. And then with a great understanding of both, like I say, is able to really turn our assumptions on their head. When you may feel one way about religion or faith or like I say, religious texts, maybe you have a negative feeling towards those or an incredibly positive feeling, and you don't so much appreciate things that don't have as much faith. Maybe you're someone you're a little freaked out by science. She shows you how science is positive, but at the same time is showing you how everywhere there is wisdom. That when you look at these old texts, that sure, humans have taken them and done horrible things with them. The worst things have been done in the name of God. But if you look carefully, you can find that these shouldn't be thrown aside. In a world today where I feel like more and more of us are, if not atheists, we're agnostics. We don't know really where to put our faith or to have any faith at all. And we really struggle with our spiritualism. And acknowledging both as having their strengths and kind of revealing how they've just been misunderstood on both sides, you appreciate how they can start to become a part of a whole picture. There's something of faith in science, and there's something of science in faith at the same time. And so really, really good for opening your eyes to a holistic view of the world, as opposed to just pigeonholing yourself with those blinders that we so often get when we start to view only one way as being the right way. And she doesn't allow herself to do that, and she's not just doing it because she feels that way. Like I say, it's a result of incredible time-consuming research that she then dedicates to her books. Another strength I can say, moving along, getting near the end of this video, I don't like them to be too long, because she is such a poet. My God, what a wordsmith when you're reading her books. They really are beautiful. I kind of found when I was younger and I was reading a few female authors, some I enjoyed. Like I really liked Anne Rice, or Anne Reese, however you say it, for Interview with the Vampire. But as I continued to read her, I found her language to be a little bit flowery, where it was kind of like, all right, we've been looking at this hill for like 10 minutes. Now let's go over the hill. Now, Margaret Atwood is able to create this beautiful, complex world and progress plot and pace at the same time, while, being incredibly poetic about the whole experience. So incredibly beautiful books to read at the same time. Just like I said, I'm trying to pick up more vocab as I read, and she has got some incredible words like sylph. That's like a slender, beautiful woman. Ooh, what a good word for complimenting a woman. You're a sylph, close to MILF, but way better, I assure you. So she has that. Her writing is beautiful as a result of the other interests in writing that she has. She brings it to her fictional work, not just her poetry. And there is even a little bit of poetry in her fictional work. Um, I also like her awareness of her writing. This will be a final point before I read a little section from a book of hers that I quite enjoy. Um, I also like, damn it, I don't want to lose this point here. And then you watch those seconds click. I can tell people are just, no, not watching this guy. I remember it. For those of you who made it this far, thank you so much. I would have left. What it is her ability to pinpoint her goals when she writes, because this woman I feel like has so many different layers to her writing, and everything as you read, you're like, that's not by accident, that's not by accident. And I was reading a little bit about her and her talking about this when people were calling her writing for the series that she's working on, Oryx and Crake, and it's a part of the Mad Adam trilogy. They were calling it sci-fi. And she said, no, 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 it's not sci-fi at all. You can't call it that. Sci-fi's got things that are way too far out there sometimes, that are absolutely impossible, or fantasy, to call it fantasy or sci-fi. Like, we don't have dragons. This is speculative fiction. So speculative fiction assumes that this actually could happen. And I like that. I was like, you really care about what you're thinking about, and then you really mean something when you write it, because if you believe that this is something that could potentially happen, then you're going to make every effort to flesh it out, that you're not just leaving things to the reader where you're like, oh, figure that out on yourself. You're going to make sure that anything that you approach in this, you've done a good job creating a whole idea of. So here we are. I'm going to do my little bit of reading here, and this is to highlight the point, like I said, that she's getting you to consider ideas of faith, ideas of science, and to consider them in a broader context. And so this is her talking about the idea of the serpent, because the serpent is so often viewed negatively as a result of Christian ideology. Among the ancient Greeks, serpents were sacred to the god of healing. In other religions, the serpent with its tail in its mouth refers to the cycle of life and to the beginning and end of time. Because they shed their skins, serpents have also symbolized renewal, the soul casting off its old self from which it emerges resplendent, a complicated symbol indeed. Therefore, how are we to be wise as serpents? Are we to eat our own tails, or tempt people to do wrongdoing, or coil around our enemies and squeeze them to death? Surely not, because in the same sentence we are told to be harmless as doves. And so also highlighting the point that when people have looked at these old phrases, religious phrases, that maybe we're not thinking as much as we should about them, and we shouldn't just jump to conclusions. We never should. So that's that. The book that I'm going to recommend is The Year of the Flood, which is the second book in the Mad Adam trilogy, following Oryx and Crake. My first video talking about the importance of writing, I called it Onyx and Crake. Oops, sorry. But I'll just post that little bit of information down in the bottom. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you get something out of it. You get some good information about this author. If you've heard of her before, more reason to read her books. If you've not, check her out, because you should really enjoy them, especially if you like dystopic future books, because I do. So that's that. If you enjoy, subscribe, and as I like to say, thanks for tripping with Dave, and until we meet again next time, world, ciao for now.